Thank you for coming this evening. My name is Kelby Maris. I'm the Park Operations Manager for the City of Sioux Falls. We're fortunate to have one of the leading experts in emerald ash borer with us tonight, and Dr. John Ball, and I'll turn it over to him.
All right, well, thank you for coming, everybody. I find it interesting. I stood in this room 9 years ago with about the same size crowd, and that was after it was found in Minnesota. And then since that time, we've kind of lost interest. My favorite was giving this talk to a room of 2. And it was 2 because there was a kid who had a science project and wanted to hear about EAB, so I gave it to 2 people. Now everybody's back in the room again. I wonder what's changed. Well, you all know the most current map is about to be changed. Emerald ash borer, which originated in the Detroit, Michigan area, has spread out to encompass all these states and millions of ash trees, with the most recent reports occurring in the Omaha area, the Welcome, Minnesota area, and the Winnipeg area. We were starting to get boxed in. The fact that it's here is not a surprise. It was inevitable. We've been telling people since 2003 the day will be coming. A number of years ago, I predicted we would find it between 2013 and 2018, and I jokingly said, if we don't find it by then, I'll bring it in. It wasn't me. All right. All right, but nevertheless, it's here, and the unfortunate thing for us, where did we happen to find it? In the largest community in the state. So, we've got a little work ahead of us. I will tell you right out, there is no good news. When the epidemic's over, you will not have any ash trees left. We are under no expectations of preventing it. We can slow it. And that's the important part, and that's why you're here tonight. We have a tremendous amount of information up already. South Dakota Extension has, if you go to our iGrow website, that has information up there about emerald ash borer, including how to identify it. The city is posting this information as well. The state is as well, South Dakota Department of Ag, and I'm going to ask Marcus to give that information at the conclusion of my talk. So you can find information out there. I will caution everyone here, you're going to be going on the internet. Don't believe everything on the internet. All right, and when you're looking for emerald ash borer information, I would prefer that you go to our South Dakota sources. The reason for that, it's the same beetle, but behavior's a little different out east than we're going to find out here. So local information, local accurate information is the best way for managing this. So, how do you know if your tree is infested? This is good news. It's going to be tough. And you know why? This was caught fairly early. So right now, in order to find a tree, you're looking actually for some fairly minimal clues. But the first clue is it an ash tree? The only tree this is going to attack is an ash tree. If you have a mountain ash tree, that's not an ash tree. You don't need to worry. If you've got a maple tree, no need to worry. If you've got an oak tree, no need to worry. But if you have an ash tree, a green ash, a blue ash, a black ash, now you need to worry. These trees, and on all our websites, we're going to help you how to identify an ash tree. But essentially, they have leaflets rather than one large leaf. This is one leaf counted into leaflets. If you see something like that, that's a pretty good indication. The other indication, take a rock, throw it. The tree it hits is probably an ash. We've planted ash almost to exclusion of everything else back in the 70s and 80s, and now we're going to live to regret that. The good news is, since we realized it was coming 14 years ago, the city of Sioux Falls has not been planting ash and has been encouraging you not to plant ash. So the good news is we don't have as much ash as we used to, but it's still our most common tree. So what are you going to be looking for? Look up in your trees this spring, your ash trees, and if you notice the canopies are thinning just a little bit, notice that we're missing some leaves there. That is a possible indicator that your tree has emerald ash borer. It doesn't work the best. Here's some trees that I looked at just this last week. You can see they're just leafing out. and you notice that some of the branches are devoid of foliage. Now, I say this is just a possibility because you know what? A lot of our ash look half dead. And so with this, the mere fact that your ash doesn't look very good just means it's trying to grow in South Dakota. It doesn't necessarily mean it has emerald ash borer. Another clue is what we call epicormic shoots, these small branches that arise along the trunk and branches. Those are also fairly common indicators of it, and as you can see here, we're getting those shoots coming off. The trouble is, you all remember the ice storm and all the pruning that was done for those. And that pruning will create a lot of epicormic shoots too. So merely looking at canopy decline and merely looking at sprouts is not enough to indicate your tree has it. Vertical splits in small trees is a pretty good indicator. If you go out and look at your small trees, the trees you can kind of put your hand around, right, that small. And if you know splits on the trunk of your ash trees, if you can pull those vertical splits back, you might find galleries. I found those as I was looking around. When you find that, you're probably looking at emerald ash borer. Unfortunately, it's not a sure thing. We do have a few other insects that'll make those too. So where's the best? This is it. Woodpeckers. Woodpeckers can identify trees far better than we can. They are looking for them. These are really tasty insects. These are Asian insects. Our native woodpeckers just really have a taste for them. And they will find them. So what you want to do is look up in the tree, and if you notice here, there's bark missing, and there's bark missing, and there's bark missing, and there's large woodpecker holes. Now, the good news is you're going to have to look up in the trees to see these. Why? Because the infestation is still fairly new. Right now, all we're finding is that they're attacking the tops of branches. We're not finding they're attacking the base of trees. But if you look up and notice in your tree that is thinning, some sprouting, and you're having woodpecker activity along the trunks here, now you're looking at a real good indication that that tree may be infested with emerald ash borer. It's one of the best. So notice this is a close-up. See where the bark has been removed here? You see the large pecks for the woodpeckers? What's interesting is you pull the bark away underneath there, there was a gallery. There was a tunnel for the beetles. They are like laser focused. How they find it, we don't know. But they can find them from beneath the bark, and they'll chip all the bark away to pull out that little insect. Here's a close-up. You notice those holes, those punches. And the ground beneath the tree will be littered with bark. Why? Because they're shredding the bark off it. We call it blonding. You'll notice that in your tree, the bark is off it in these long strips, and it kind of lightens the wood. Those are excellent indicators that your tree is infested with emerald ash borer. See this? That's not here yet. That's what you'll see here 5 years from now. That's a tree that is heavily infested. All the bark is removed from it. We've not seen those in Sioux Falls. Thank goodness for that. This picture, if you want to know, is in Rochester, Minnesota. But the infestation is much older there. As I say, this was caught fairly early on. And so the only indicators of damage from the woodpeckers is up high. But if you pull that bark away, there it is. That's the larvae, the worm. Makes these serpentine galleries as it's going back and forth. Right now that worm is changing to a little pupae. And probably in 3 weeks it's going to emerge from the tree as an adult and then fly to the same tree that it came out of or nearby trees. And it will make this characteristic D-shaped hole when it comes out of the tree. The D-shaped holes are not very visible yet either. Why? Because most of these are concentrated in the upper canopy. Why? Because this is actually a relatively young attack. It's the best. The best of the best is finding the adult this summer. Now you can see why they're called the emerald ash borer, that coppery green. They're a fairly small insect, about this big, very shiny. There are a lot of lookalikes. They are not very easy to find, but you might find them on the side of your ash tree on a nice sunny day. They like to fly midday. They like sunny weather. They like warm weather. But you're not likely to actually see the adults. The adults then will be laying eggs on trees. Now, emerald ash borer is a lazy beetle. When it leaves a tree, why not just lay your eggs on the tree you just left? And it will do that. It will attack a tree for 5 years or so, every year attacking it again and again and again until it kills it. As long as there's suitable food nearby, it will not fly far. If there aren't any suitable trees nearby, it can fly as much as 10 miles. But because of our concentration of ash here, there's no need to fly from one end of town to the other. There's plenty of ash between there. So during the summer months, what we're asking you to do is not to remove ash trees. That's when they're flying. If you cut down an ash tree in the summer and haul it somewhere, where are the beetles doing? They're coming out of the tree as you go. You typically find infestations following transportation corridors. So during the summer months, as the adults are coming out, let them lay eggs on the same tree they came out of. After Labor Day, when everybody's inside the tree again, then we can cut them down and dispose of them, because we don't have to be concerned about them leaving the tree. Not until the following Memorial Day. So from Memorial Day to Labor Day, ash trees we would prefer not to be removed other than for storm damage or some other necessity. The other thing is this insect keys in on pruning wounds. If you go out and prune your ash tree during the summer, that odor will actually attract them. So unless there's a need for public safety or for storm damage and such, do not prune your ash during the summer months. You're going to find a lot of our activities are going to be delayed until after Labor Day. Summer will be spent finding the trees. This is a black locust. It has nice white flowers that hang, very fragrant. When this tree's in bloom, that's when emerald ash borer is flying. All 3 websites will identify that time. Right now, this tree is not even leafing out yet in Sioux Falls. We probably have at least 3 weeks before we're getting the main emergence. What's it going to kill? I'd like you to look at the 10-year survival of green ash. 0. Black ash, 0. White ash, 0. Nobody here owns a tree that's going to survive it. Right? There used to be people thinking, well, our trees are tougher out here. They're tough, but they're not that tough. Our trees have no natural defenses against this insect. They will kill every tree unless you protect it with an insecticide. But you are not probably going to have the lucky tree. 60 million dead trees prove us wrong. They're going to kill every one of them eventually in town. So what should we do now? Treat the trees you want to save. One of our recommendations we've had for years is that when we identify the insect, confirm the insect, then trees within 15 miles radius of that should be treated. Essentially, if you live in the city of Sioux Falls and you like your ash tree, you should begin treatments now. I'll explain a little bit about treatments later. There's no need to call me to have me come out and look at your ash tree if you live in Sioux Falls. There's no need to call Dwayne Stahl. There's no need to call the Department of Ag to come out and look at your ash tree. Because what did I just tell you? If you have an ash tree in Sioux Falls and you like it, start treatments now. All right, whether there's obvious symptoms or not. We can't always predict what tree has been attacked. If you treat it, the treatments are highly, highly effective. Right? This is not a treatment where half of them will live, other half will die. If you treat your trees, and I've seen it in other areas where emerald ash borer has gone through like a wildfire, over 10 years, the only ash left at the end of that 10, 12 time period are the ash that were treated during the epidemic. So if you like your ash tree, consider doing that. The others, remove trees that are infested, and that's what we'll be doing this fall. Going out there and taking a look. Private trees, of course, if the tree's infested, that'd be a good time to get rid of it. And if you don't do either, if you say, John, I'm not going to inject my tree, I'm not going to cut my tree down, now you're going to have a bigger problem. Emerald ash borer infested trees, when they die, we use one word to describe them. It's called brittle. They fall apart very quickly. These will not become the ghost trees that we leave and use in South Dakota as signposts, turn at the dead cottonwood. These trees fall very quickly after they completely die, So that's years away for us right now. But this is not something you can say, well, I'm not going to do anything, because eventually that's going to catch up to you. This is the death curve for every community. Using Dwayne Stahl's data from the city here, he estimates that we have about 87,000 ash trees in Sioux Falls. Because of some quick action by individual I'll mention here at the end of my presentation, we're right down here. It was caught early. We have about maybe 300 infested trees. We've identified about 250. Year 4, 2,600. Year 6, 13,000. Year 8, 61,000 trees are going to die during that time period. By 10 years, it won't be a problem anymore because everybody's dead. So you might say, what's the point of doing anything? We're going to try to flatten out that curve. You do not want to have a couple of years where we have to take down most of the trees, do we? That's a lot of cost. Nobody could get ahead of it. The more action we take now, if people go out there and treat their trees, if people are vigilant and watch their trees that are infested that they don't want to treat, take down this fall and winter. That will help stretch out this curve and buy you more time. All right? That's the importance of coming here tonight. That's the importance of managing it. We cannot just say we'll do nothing. If we do nothing, that accelerates this curve. And you'll have street and street of standing dead trees that are only then going to fall. So, our recommendations: don't apply treatments until the insect has been confirmed within 15 miles of your location. For those people watching this outside of the city, unless you're within 15 miles of Sioux Falls, no worries. If you live in Aberdeen, it's not there yet. If you live in Rapid City, it's not there yet. When we find it there, we'll let you know. And the good thing is, if we come out and find your tree is already infested, you say, oh my goodness, Dr. Ball, my tree has all these symptoms, you can still treat it and bring it back. That's how effective these treatments are. They're not just preventative, they're therapeutic. So you might say, well, how do you know my tree isn't infested? I don't. But I do know the treatments are effective enough that if you start treating now and it is infected, you can eliminate the infection. But the treatments are done every 2 years. Our recommendation is doing just as you see here. Going out there and doing trunk injections. And in the ideal, we want to get out there and inject the trees before they get beyond 25% decline. Certainly 35%. The good thing here, because this was caught so early, we're up here at 5%. We're up here at 10%. All the infested trees that we looked at could still be brought back by doing timely injections. This was caught early. Trunk injections by commercial applicators are the best. I know in South Dakota we like to do it ourselves. And there are products you can go out and buy that can treat small trees. But for large trees, you really need to have a commercial applicator who has the equipment, the knowledge, and the concentrations of chemicals to protect those trees. I really recommend you all consider hiring a service to come out and provide that rather than trying to do it yourself. All right, this is not a good do-it-yourself project. Find something else. If you take a look at the treatments here, and there's a variety of methods that we can put into the tree, and by putting in a tree, the chemical only kills what? The beetle we're after. All right, we're not looking at putting it into the soil. We're not spraying it onto the tree. We're not spraying it into the air. It goes directly into the tree, kills the beetles as they feed. If you want to know what that's going to cost you, it depends on the size of the tree. Larger the tree, it costs more, but if you take a look at between $150 and $300 per tree every 2 years, you have it about right. So if you've got an ash tree in your yard that's fairly good size, you might say, well, that's going to cost me $200 to treat it, and I'm going to have to spend that every 2 years, $100 a year. If you're like me, you spend more than that on coffee in a week, all right, and you get to keep your tree. If you say, well, what's it going to cost to remove it? More than that, all right, a lot more than that. And I'll give you some positive news. After the epidemic is over, after it's gone through and eliminated a lot of the ash in your city, if you've been treating, you can start stretching it out. You won't need to treat every other year. Why? There won't be as many beetles. So if you can stick with it for maybe 6 applications, every 2 years, 6 applications, I'm not going to tell you you'll never have to treat again, but I will tell you you're not going to have to treat every other year. Some communities have stretched it out as much as 5 or 6 years between treatments. So there is a little light at the end of that tunnel. Treatment window is going to begin very soon. That was the other great thing with this one. It was caught just before the best time to treat. You all have time to go out and find someone to treat your trees. They certainly have plenty of time to do the treatments. They're done as the tree leaves out, and they can be done through midsummer easily. So don't worry, people can get to your tree. And the good thing, if you treat your tree, every beetle that attacks that tree dies. Your tree becomes the roach motel. They all go in, they don't come out. All right, and you know what that's doing? That's helping the city as a whole. Because what are you doing? You're killing beetles. In fact, they have found that if 20% of the trees are treated in a community, 20% of all the trees, that really slows down the epidemic. Then we're going to be focusing on removing the infested trees, because we remove them and burn them, that's going to kill beetles as well. Again, after Labor Day, they're all back inside the tree. But now it's targeted. That tree is infested. This picture I took in Michigan. In the old days, you'd cut down every ash within a half mile of it. You know what that did? Spread it faster. So now it's more targeted. We're going to take out that tree and leave the other trees to soak up the beetles, because what did I tell you? They don't like to fly very far. So you notice I haven't said everybody run out and cut down all your ash trees. I said treat your ash trees if you like. You know, if you say, well, I got 2. It's like your kids. Pick your favorite. All right? Find the ones you like. All right, the other, well, we have the trees out there. They're going to be cut down. Remove them from Labor Day to Memorial Day through the winter. We're going to have a discussion here next talking about where do we haul all this wood, because that's the important thing. And I'll leave that for others, but I will say that it does have to be managed, how we manage the chips, where the wood can be taken. But I'm also going to point this out. Everyone here that says, you know what, I'm going to wait, you better remove your tree. If you're not going to treat it, you better remove your tree before the canopies decline to half. Because at that point, they start getting very brittle. They start getting more difficult to remove. And you know what a tree companies do? It's going to raise their costs. So to me, the window is you really want to start treating now. And if you say, well, I don't want to treat now, I want to wait. All right, but you're gambling a little bit. And when your tree gets to the point a few years from now where it's half dead, they can't treat it anymore and bring it back. The only thing you can do is remove it. And that removal cost goes up because now you have a tree that's brittle. In fact, communities, what did they start doing? Just pushing the trees over, they become that brittle. My best example, in one community, they tossed a string up in the tree to set a line. They pulled on the string, the entire tree fell. That's how brittle they can become. That's years away from us right now, but I'm trying to get you to think ahead. City of Minneapolis, that's what they're doing, cutting and pushing over infested trees. The other problem too, taking down those trees is not for the amateur. It's almost like a sap rot, and they tend to fall in unpredictable ways. So this is not a tree when we get to that point 5 years from now that we want homeowners going out and attempting to remove these trees. They can literally be killers because you end up without a hinge. And if you wait a little bit longer, they just collapse and fall. In fact, we've had them fall when people are cutting them. Think of the height of your tree, look at the strike zone, and that's where your tree will end up. So, I gave you some bad news, relatively close. I didn't give you much good news, but I want to emphasize a couple of things, and I'll take questions. All right? First of all, this was caught early. I cannot overemphasize that. All right? So we have plenty of time to start making decisions for the city in that. But one of the decisions that you want to be making very soon is take a look at your ash trees. Decide the trees that you do want to keep. It may be all of them. Or you might say, well, I'm going to treat half this year and half next year. Some people will do that too. I understand it. That's fine. All right, but you might want to start making decisions as to what you want to do with your ash trees, because I'm very confident, just as I was we'd find it between 2013 and 2018, that if you do nothing and you're still in that same house, 10 to 12 years from now, you're going to find that that tree's collapsing. Again, the good message is the more we manage our individual trees and that, the more we're going to slow this population. That's why I'm all pleased you're here tonight. The last thing I have to do here tonight before I take your questions, I have to introduce you to my personal hero. All right, and my reasoning for that is I've told all the arborists every year, here's what emerald ash borer looks like. If you see symptoms, this is what it is. If you see anything like this, take a picture, text me. Well, we had an arborist, and I also said I would not be the one who'd find it. We had an arborist who went out, saw that, sent me the pictures, and when I saw the pictures, I said, I will see you in an hour. All right? Thanks to this person and the company, they were able to identify this early on and did all the right steps. They contacted me. We went through our approach to, identified the insect, and then submitted it to APHIS for the official confirmation. But she said it was okay to introduce her. So I'm going to have you stand up right now, say hi, and we're going to give her a round of applause for doing the right thing. All right. Thank you, and don't find any more problems for me, all right? This one was enough, but I really appreciated all she did. Well, we're going to go over quarantine, but before we do that, are there any questions relating to biology or that, or have I depressed you enough this evening? Yes, sir.
You had talked about 3 different ash trees. I have one, I think they said it was a Marshall seedless.
Marshall seedless is a green ash.
Oh, it is a green
Yeah, it's a cultivar of green ash. Thank you for mentioning that. We tend to plant cultivars, Marshall seedless, Patmores and that, but they are all either green ash, blue ash, or black ash. We were never good at naming ash trees. We just picked colors. But essentially, if you have an ash tree in your yard, it's going to be one of those 3, generally speaking. Yes, sir.
I've been treating my ash tree for several years now with something I buy from Menards that I've spread around the little base of the tree. Am I wasting my time on that, or is that might be effective? It's a Bayer product.
Understood. How big is your tree if you had to put your hands around it?
Oh, it's got to be 60 inches in diameter.
Yes, you should hire someone. The reasoning for that is there are products available for homeowners to use in emerald ash borer, but as you might expect, the concentration's a lot weaker. Okay? And they do work for small trees. If you said, well, John, I've got an ash tree about this big that I'm doing, certainly go ahead. But when you've got an ash tree that you're not able to put your hands around, what you really need is a better delivery system, trunk is very good, and a higher concentration of chemical. So for those larger size trees, it would be my recommendation you consider hiring someone to do it rather than the pour around products. Small trees certainly can work though. Any other questions? Oh, yes, yes, sir.
Clarify, is mountain ash included?
No, mountain ash, the only thing mountain ash has in common with ash is part of its name. It's no more close related than dogs and cats.
How do you have ways to identify which ash it is?
You mean whether it's a mountain ash or an ash? Yes, we do. It's on that website. It'll be on that website. Because you're right. Fortunately, it's a relatively easy once you see the pictures to separate them. I'll make it real simple here. If your tree has white flowers in the spring, it's not an ash. It would be the mountain ash. Okay, so that, but you're right. That's a very common confusion. People say, well, I lose my mountain ash. Not at all. Good. I thought there was a question back. Yes, sir, way back there.
Well, I've got about 8 of those ash trees in my farm and a couple in town. They're about 8 years old, 9 years old, and it kind of appears to me, by look at the economics, I should start my chainsaw and, well, put in hackberries.
Yeah. You know what? It's kind of like playing poker. When do you fold? And you probably didn't hear what he said, but if I heard you right, these are like 8 or 9 year old trees. Yeah. And so he says, I have some little trees that if you took your chainsaw out, cut them down and planted new ones, that you're going to have nice trees relatively soon as opposed to trees you're going to have to care for.
I said hackberry.
Yep, I like hackberry. So I like what you're proposing. On the other end, some are going to say, you know what, I have a nice ash tree in my yard. I have one in Brookings. We're not in the zone yet, so I'm not treating. But you know what, when we find it in Brookings, I'll treat it because it's this big around and it shades my whole patio. And I'm old. If I plant a little tree there, I'm not going to enjoy it. So I just soon go out and treat it. Yeah, that I would, this I won't. So you know what, but you know, the thought process is absolutely correct. You're planning to do something, you know, rather than sit and wait. So I like that, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Say, when you say hiring someone for treatment, who does that?
Well, I might let Dwayne jump in, but I'll start at Dwayne. Tell me if I said anything wrong. That the city of Sioux Falls, which is another wonderful thing about the city, you have to be licensed here. All right, so you want to make sure that they're licensed in to operate in your city, and they're going to have to have 2 licenses. They're going to need a turf and ornamental license from the South Dakota Department of Ag. But then the city also requires an arborist license. And right now, how many companies are on your website for doing treatments? Go ahead, stand up.
Yeah, right now we have 40 arborists that are on our list, and that is on our website, siouxfalls.org / forestry, I believe. We'll get right to our page. And we will soon be putting another list on there, and that list is the arborists that provide services of insect and disease problems. So we'll have that list, and that's the list that you'll need to go off of. We'll make sure that they do have their South Dakota pesticide certification license. And if you have any questions, give me a call.
Excellent for that, and that's going to help because, you know, every time you do something, you're going to get some fly-by-nighters. Vast majority of companies are always honest and trying to do the right thing, but I think having their licensing process is actually going to act as a nice filter too. So that's good. Yes, sir, again.
Yeah, I got a question. Is at what point would the arborists and all the people who sell trees, at what point do you think they had stopped and told people to no longer plant those trees in Sioux Falls?
Well, how long has that been off your list of recommended trees, Dwayne? Ash.
Well, there were 2 phases. I happened to go out with a contingent of a 5-state area to Brighton, Michigan, and went to the Ground Zero in Detroit. And in Brighton, Michigan, that's where the U.S. Forest Service has their research on emerald ash borer, being right there in Michigan. So when I got back, the first thing I did, we already had a list of trees that are approved trees for the parking strip between the curb and sidewalk. The first thing I did is I changed that list. We still had ash on it, but I put a disclaimer kind of like, do not plant more than 10% in your neighborhood. That by default pretty much excluded it from the list, but we were still on that time period of well, is it going to get here yet? It didn't take me much longer, and we went, yes, it's going to get here. So that was taken off, I believe, 2012. Ash was no longer on our approved street tree list.
So I have a question.
Yes.
If I decide to take down my ash, what would you recommend?
When you say you decide to take down your ash, what would you recommend? I'm not sure of the question.
The tree. What tree would I recommend?
Oh, excellent. Okay, well, I thought you were asking me what chainsaw you would use, you know. But I'll make it simple tonight. All right? I like simple too. Look at your neighbors, see what they've planted, plant something else. It's as simple as that. Dwayne has a list of recommended trees. I've looked at the list. We've talked it over. It's an excellent list of trees. There's lots of good choices out there. But I'll tell you the one thing we want to avoid. We don't want to have someone standing up here 30 years from now, because I won't be here. I'll be fishing, all right? And not complaining that everybody planted maple, for example, or everybody planted something else. We want to see a variety of trees planted. Let's face it, if there was only 30 ash in town here, who would care? The fact that a third of our trees are ash, because everybody planted it because it was easy, all right? But so take a look at his list. It's got a lot of great choices. You got a lot of possibilities in this town, but I also would consider, look what all your neighbors have planted. You know, this is where you want to stand out and have something different. Good question. Yes, ma'am.
We live along the river off of 57th Minnesota Western. That's a big neighborhood there of of trees along the river. I mean,
Correct.
are those all ash trees or?
There are a lot of ash along our river system, correct. And eventually they'll end up being infested.
My question to you is for the injections, is that after they leaf out all summer long until fall?
Good question. How long can you do it?
Yeah, because there's going to be a cram to get them done, right?
There always is, all right? But what it amounts to is you want to do it at the appropriate time. And right, exactly. And so here's the thing. We like to start about now as the trees have leafed out. Then you go into mid-late summer. There are some products that can be used even later. So again, your choices, there are some products that can only be used during the spring time period. There are some that can be longer and some longer than that. So,
Whether injections or pesticide.
Injections or bark sprays or such. That is also going to be up on the website. The various options you have and the time frame you can use them. Excellent question. So you might be choosing something based upon a time period as well.
Yeah, or some might get left out for the year.
Some could, but you know what? The good thing is there's going to be a lot of companies that are getting into this business.
What will the city of Sioux Falls do with their trees? Treated or taken off?
You know what? You gave me a great segue to get off the stage. All right, because I'm just the bug goober. All right, I just tell you the biology of it. But with that, we do have 2 more presentations, and we'll take more questions afterwards too. But yes, we've got to take a look at what the city response will be, and then also from regulatory. So which of the 2 you want to take it next?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take a shot at that. So, City of Sioux Falls is one of the largest landowners in the city. So as you can imagine, our challenge with the number of ash trees is a little bit larger than yours. There are a lot of management options that John has talked about, and that's exactly the approach that we're going to take. We haven't exactly defined what we're going to do and where we're going to do it all, but that process is in place to develop that plan, that response plan for the management of the city ash trees. So, not much of an answer, but at this point, that's the only one we have. Currently, the maintenance of trees in the right-of-way are, by ordinance, are the responsibility of the abutting property owner. But as I mentioned again, this is a process. There are a lot of management options for you as homeowners, for us as the city, and at this point, that's really all we know. All right, I think we'll turn it over to one more. Sorry.
When will the city have a response to us so we know if the city is going to offer any assistance or not?
That's a very good question, and that I don't really have an answer for. Process is ongoing. I really hope that within the next, by the middle of this summer, that we will have solid plans in place.
So not until the middle of summer? In the dark until then?
Well, I don't know if I'd say in the dark. I mean, we're obviously going to be communicating this process as we go. I mean, it's a fluid situation at this point. We got a lot of irons in the fire and a lot of things to discuss and a lot of decisions to make. So I don't have a perfect time frame. And like I mentioned before, it's not a great answer, but at this point, that's the answer we have. And as soon as our plan is solid and in place, it will, of course, be communicated. Also, the part of this response is going to be coupled with our conversation with the administration and with the city council as we develop our 2019 operating budget as well. Yes, sir.
Once you progressed into this a little bit, is there any chance that the city can assist in standardizing the cost of treating these trees? I noticed online some cities out east had offered their residents their city price when they, as far as treating the trees, so that that price would be, a bulk rate, since you've got so many trees to treat. Is there any chance the city could assist in that?
It's definitely, the question was whether or not the city could extend a bulk rate to try to set a price, correct me if I'm wrong, but to kind of set a price for private property owners too at the cost of treating the trees. Something that I hadn't heard of until tonight, so it's definitely something that we can research. And another one of those management options for us to consider.
I went and got a product that's made by Bayer, and took it home, tried to work around our tree with it. Is that stuff effective, or are you better off waiting for a professional product to come in? Or?
Yeah, well, as Dr. Ball had said, really the gold standard for treatment is the trunk injection, done by a licensed arborist with the commercial applicator's license. Yes, ma'am.
What's the life of the ash tree?
The life of the ash tree.
Without emerald ash borer? With emerald ash borer, we can start the clock now. Without emerald ash borer, a lot of the ash in our communities may live 50 to 70 years. In the forest, they can live as much as 150.
Hello, everybody. We're gonna. My name's Dave Hirsh. I'm from Bismarck, North Dakota. Unfortunately, owner of about 25 ash trees in my yard. We're expecting the same problem that has arrived here. Unfortunately, we haven't detected it in North Dakota yet, but it's likely. We feel it's likely there. We just haven't found it yet. I'm representing USDA APHIS. My title is State Plant Health Director. I'm responsible for my agency's programs for North Dakota and South Dakota. One of the responsibilities that my agency has is the regulatory. Emerald ash borer has been a big project of my agency for many years. Since I believe it was 2000 when it was first discovered in Detroit, Michigan. They feel it originally arrived here on ships, dunnage, wood packaging, crating, etc. That was more raw in nature for taken off of the ships coming in from China. So they feel it kind of arrived at the port of Detroit. I have to say a huge amount of resource was put towards emerald ash borer to eradicate it back in the day, both in the United States and Canada. Tremendous amount of money and resource and science applied to the problem. Unfortunately, it failed. As Dr. Ball mentioned, the problem just slowly spread across the United States, and unfortunately, it's arrived here in Sioux Falls, and it's now creeping out onto the Great Plains. By the way, I should say, Dr. Ball, thank you for that presentation. It was fantastic. What a resource your state has to have somebody like Dr. Ball. I think we're going to be kidnapping Dr. Ball maybe later on this summer in North Dakota, possibly. I don't know. There's a map going around the room. It's a quarantine zone that's been put in place by the South Dakota State Department of Agriculture. And the purpose of this quarantine is to, as Dr. Ball mentioned, you saw that curve. Like you mentioned, we're trying to flatten that curve out, slow the spread of this problem. We don't want to give this problem to Aberdeen or Brookings or Pierre or whoever might be that doesn't have this problem yet. Maybe they want to, maybe some of those communities, I know that some of those communities are already changing out their ash, or they're trying to reduce the amount of ash that's in their cities and in their on their properties. That's what I'm doing in Bismarck right now. Took out a couple of ash trees already and planting some replacements, so maybe they've got some years, and there'll be a little bit of shade when emerald ash borer finally arrives in my yard. But anyway, the purpose of this quarantine that's been put in place is to slow that spread, and that's basically the theme of what I don't have a lot to say about it, but it was put in place. I believe it became official just yesterday. Is that correct, Brenda? By the way, I should introduce some more people here, but what's going to happen next? So the state quarantine is in place. In my agency, we have some regulatory authority that we can apply to the situation to help slow the spread. We can ask landfill, the city of Sioux Falls, the landfill. We can work with different solid wood or wood waste disposal options. We can help start to build those. So when trees do come down in Sioux Falls, and there becomes a need to dispose of this safely to help slow the spread. I guess you could say that's kind of the first priority that we have right now, is to build a safe disposal method so everybody in the city has a way to safely dispose of that material to help slow the spread or move it to another location. This is the state quarantine that was put in place just yesterday. I can say that my agency, USDA, we're going to have the same quarantine. We're going to take a mirror image of it, and we're in the process right now of trying to get a federal quarantine established that's a mirror image of that, and we can apply some of the authority that USDA has to the regulatory side of things. I guess other thing I want to say about it is my agency, that it's a hot button issue. We want to this is a priority for us, and we're going to be on site. We're going to be in the city quite a bit this summer, and we're going to be helping the local foresters, the city. We're in beginning a serious, as it was mentioned, it's a very fluid situation. So we're really in the process of establishing this quarantine, getting things set up to give people the most options that they possibly can have to slow the spread, give you more options for treatments, replacement of trees, more time for those replacement trees to grow instead of just a big wipeout. There's certain things that we're going to have as regulated articles, and basically that's any material that can, for example, ash trees and the wood waste of ash trees. It's going to become a regulated material, and the purpose of that is, or designating it that as such, is to, again, just to make sure that material is safely handled. If it has emerald ash borer in the tree, we want to make sure that material is taken down properly, as Dr. Ball mentioned, but also disposed of properly, again, just to stop the problem or slow it down as much as we possibly can. Firewood is another one. I guess you're going to ask about firewood?
Yeah, I was going to ask about firewood.
Okay.
You know, if it's in the quarantine area, can you take it out? And what's to prevent, say, a camper from coming from Minnesota bringing ash to, say, Lewis and Clark, or somebody from Sioux Falls bringing ash to other parts of the state?
Right. Great question. The question is in regard to movement of firewood. I have to say that firewood is probably the number one item on our hit list as far as to stop the movement of firewood. Emerald ash borer is an unbelievable good hitchhiker, and if you have an ash tree in city of Sioux Falls that is infested, it's taken down, that firewood is stacked in your yard, for example. If you were to take that wood, move it to your favorite lake home out of the county here, or maybe out on the Missouri in Pierre, or another state park or something like that, I really want to ask you right now is to please don't do that. That's the number one way this thing is going to get around South Dakota. Please don't move firewood.
Is there a penalty if you do it? There is a penalty, and for doing that, it's that serious, and it's that it's that effective of a way to move this problem around. So please don't do that. Your neighbors will appreciate it. Your relatives in the next city over will really appreciate you doing everything you can to not move this bug around. Any firewood or just ash?
Just ash. That's a good point. It's the host material of emerald ash borer, and those are the ash trees that Dr. Ball mentioned or described. Yes, sir.
It's on the firewood, it's any hardwood firewood, just to clarify. The problem is with firewood, because it's cut in small pieces, it's hard to distinguish which is ash or something else. Coniferous softwood firewood can be moved unregulated, but any hardwood firewood that's produced in the quarantine area cannot leave the quarantine area. So that would, like I say,
Great, thank you, Greg. Yes, sir.
Even if you have a stack of firewood that's cut now, ash, will that become infested by the emerald ash borer?
Good question.
Dead?
The question is, yeah, if you took down a live tree today and stacked up firewood, can that wood be infested? And I'm going to ask Dr. Ball to help me with this. I believe at least this summer it probably could, but I'm going to let Dr. Ball.
All right, that gets a little trickier because here's the issue. Emerald ash borer has to have a living host. Its young can only survive feeding on living tissue. So if the tree is dead, right, no bark on it, it's not going to attack it. Now the problem is, if they're still in there, they'll come out of it. And that's our problem. We don't want them leaving. So to keep it on the safe side, let's just not move ash firewood, period. Because it's awfully hard to determine how dry it is.
Thank you.